What's happening, guys? So this video is going to be my post-ride review of the Triumph Daytona 660. Huge shout out for Triumph Houston for giving me the opportunity to spend a little time with this gem. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So let's dive into it. I'll give you the specs, some of my impressions, and then I'll sum this whole thing up at the very end. So cheat sheet in hand, let's get started. Specifications on this motorcycle for the type of bike that it is, which is more or less an A2 style motorcycle, 94 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque, and the bike checks in at 440 pounds. It feels incredibly light and nimble. When you put your leg over this motorcycle, that is the very first thing that you notice, just how easily the motorcycle fits. And I thought that was very interesting. When I first laid eyes on this motorcycle, I got the impression that it was smaller and lighter, but just throwing a leg over it, it feels smaller and lighter than it really was. So that was kind of a cool initial impression with this bike. Speaking of throwing a leg over the bike, the riding position, it's comfortable, it's sporty, of course. I mean, just look at the thing, but it's very similar to a sport naked motorcycle, the way that the seating position is. It's not at all aggressive. You're not all balled up on this motorcycle like a hyper sports machine. It's not meant for that type of rider, and it's not meant for that type of riding, and so the riding position complements that. Again, very comfortable, very sport touring-esque, if that maybe rings home a little bit better for you. As far as the power delivery with that 660 triple, it's so nice through the mid-range. Guys, this motorcycle, as a commuter, as a sport bike that you would want to hop on every day, ride into the city, take into work, this bike would be a ball for that because, well, it's just so torquey through the mid-range. It's effortless, rolling into the throttle and making a transition from, say, 50 to 75 miles per hour on the highway in fifth gear or sixth gear. The bike just accommodates that so eagerly, and that is a characteristic that I found, well, it was addictive in a way and endearing as well. The bike responded like a motorcycle with a larger displacement than just 660 cc's. Now, I will admit that the power does fall off a bit as you rip the thing through the RPM band. Now, I didn't really lean on this bike very heavily very often, but I can tell you that it felt like there were some limiters in play. The idea that I got from this bike was that there was more to it, but again, it was somewhat restricted for the type of bike that it is. What about throttle response in general? Now, one of the things that I noticed about this bike is that it was a little bit soft on the initial twist of the throttle, and then it was very, well, predictable and normal feeling once you were basically rowing through the gears or just at cruise. Some may criticize the bike for that. I personally don't really have a problem with that because of the type of motorcycle that it is, an entry-level sports bike. That type of gradient in the throttle allows for a smoother takeoff, especially helping those folks that may be new to this power level. Well, you don't want something that's going to be snappy. You want something that's going to usher you into acceleration, if you will, and that's what that throttle gradient does. And again, maybe for an all-out sport bike, not really what you're looking for, but for this type of bike, absolutely cool. I like it. Now, what about the suspension? Just fine. So it is adjustable only in preload from the rear, and that's okay for this bike. It is not an all-out track-focused missile, okay? This is a street-focused motorcycle for guys that want something simple, fun to ride, flickable, for the newcomer to sport bikes, to get you used to riding a motorcycle with an advanced level of acceleration and handling. The suspension is just fine. The last thing that you need as a beginner is to try to start fiddling with suspension bits before you have an overall understanding of motorcycling in general, and more to the point, the platform that this type of bike is. Again, it's a sport bike still at the end of the day, and this is the type of riding you want to do. This is the type of machine that I personally kind of wish they would have had when I was getting started way so many years ago. Oh, the tires on this thing, they're Michelin Power 6s. Okay, so if you're not familiar, a Michelin Power 6 tire is a pretty aggressive street track type of a tire. It's a legit tire on this bike. So they're planning on whoever buys these motorcycles to be out testing their skill sets for sure. And with a tire like the Power 6, I kind of see them working a little bit. The Power 6 is a type of tire that does need a little bit of heat into it to really start working properly. Kind of like a set of, say, a S22, except the S22 does heat up very quickly. The cool thing about having the Power 6 in 180/55 and 120/70, both on 17-inch wheels, by the way. But the cool thing I like about the Power 6 is that until they get to temperature, and they heat up very quickly, but they will give a little bit of feedback, if you will. And where like a set of stickier tires like S22s, S23s, Rosso 3s, or Rosso 4s, these tires will give feedback initially, at least I found, that will kind of train the mind of somebody just getting into bikes that, oh wait, I can't really rail on this thing until those tires heat up. Again, to me, it almost seems like a good training method to have these types of tires on this type of bike. So overall, what am I talking about when I say this type of bike? Guys, this motorcycle is ideally put together for somebody that wants to have a true A2 class middleweight sport bike, but does not want to be bothered by all of the extra horsepower, the extra drama, the extra adjustability, or anything else that comes with an advanced middleweight hyper sport bike. This is a sport bike for the street, and as such, it does an amazing job of that. Very responsive engine. The suspension itself is good. The turn-in is good. Everything about it is actually really good and confidence inspiring, which the entry-level sport rider is going to need. This is the type of bike that will absolutely not overwhelm you with the amount of power that it will put down, but it puts down plenty to be entertaining, both for an entry-level rider and for guys that are more advanced. As far as the limitations of this motorcycle, again, I have to say that every one of the criticisms of this motorcycle I can find where it's a benefit. So again, that non-adjustable suspension aside from preload, well, that's great. You don't have somebody fiddling with suspension when they don't have an understanding yet of what it is truly supposed to feel like just to ride the machine in general. To have that advanced seating position, to have that advanced quicker turn-in, that's what you need to be focusing on with a bike like this, not fooling around with suspension and doing other things that, again, quite frankly, you don't really know what you're doing at this stage of the game. And by the way, if you were to compete in middleweight class racing, which is a big deal these days, this would be top of the class in terms of power. And if you want to be very competitive with that, well, there's upgrades available for that, and racers do that anyway. But we'll go ahead and hold off until that point. The bike is set up perfectly fine. That throttle being a little bit soft on initial turn, that's okay. The new to sport bike rider, who's also new to sport bike power, doesn't need a very responsive throttle that's going to be abrupt in its power delivery. Something a little bit softer down low. Again, it helps to build confidence. These riders could be riding in rain or wet weather and not changing their riding modes, which you've got three. You've got sport, road, and rain. Let's say you don't change those settings. You're not even thinking about it. Or you're freaked out because you're riding in rain to begin with. Whatever the case, it doesn't matter. I don't see anything wrong with the throttle mapping on this bike, again, for the type of motorcycle that it is. I truly did enjoy the seating position of this bike. I like that it doesn't have a whole lot of tech involved in it. Some people say it doesn't have enough technology. I don't know what people do with all this extra technology that comes on motorcycles anyway. One of the reasons why I like to ride is to disconnect and kind of recenter. All the extra tech is just going to be a distraction. This bike doesn't really have any of that. I think that's a great thing. Focus on the task at hand. You're here to learn and to entertain yourself and to have fun and to develop a skill set. not do whatever it is that that tech would do for you. It's completely unnecessary, and it doesn't have it. I like that about the bike. So overall, my impressions, my takeaway, I ended up liking this motorcycle more than I thought I would, if I'm being honest. Now, I understand there is some criticism that it's not the 675. It's not a successor to the real Daytona. Well, guys, I got to tell you a couple of things on that point. Again, I think that it's a good thing that it's not. This is the type of motorcycle that will get folks into riding motorcycles again. Hypersports bikes, well, let's be honest, they just don't sell. And, well, they don't sell in the volumes that these entry-level A2 style motorcycles will sell for. And the folks that do like to ride the A2 style bike sportingly, they're going to be at a higher skill set when they're done with this motorcycle than somebody that, well, they're starting out with a hyper-class bike, and, well, where are you going to go from there? If you don't know what you're doing with suspension settings, you can ruin the way that the bike handles. It's a great way to get yourself into a phenomenal motorcycle without having all the trappings of the settings and things like that. But the fact that it's not the 675, let me get back to my point here. Yeah, it doesn't have the power that the 675 presumably would have. But again, those bikes don't sell, the A2s do, and there's a growing group of guys that are racing and tracking those A2 entry-level middleweight bikes. They're not going after the higher power. They're finding that these more modestly powered, better suited for the street bikes are just more fun in general. Ain't nothing wrong with that. So again, is there a complaint that you could have about the Daytona not being a 675? Well, it would be the same complaint as old school Triumph fans saying that the 675 isn't a 955 or a 1050. See how it works? Anyway, at the end of the day, if you're looking at this motorcycle because you want a solid, fun, extremely entertaining, forgiving motorcycle that is going to be sporting, it's going to introduce you to a riding position and a power delivery and a handling that you may not have been able to experience before, take a look at this bike. And by the way, it checks in far south of $10,000. About $9,200 to $9,500 will get you into one of these things. So I don't know what else I could say on this motorcycle other than get over there and ride one. Now, there's one bit of tech that I forgot to mention, and that's a quick shifter. Guys, the transmission on this motorcycle is extremely good without a quick shifter. And slick shifting the whole bit, I don't know that that quick shifter option is necessarily worth it. On this type of bike, I'd prefer to not have it so that you can learn your own blipping on your downshifts. But to each his own in that, and if it makes your life easier to have it, so be it. But with all that being said, big fan of the bike myself, would love to have taken one home, if for no other reason, just to have a fun commuter bike that would entertain as much as perform its daily duties without failing. With that, guys, post up your comments, let me know what you think about that bike, and we will catch you on the next one. That's a wrap.